Hey, hey, hey. I am so excited to continue our literary series. Today, we have an incredibly and exciting new author, I guess new-ish author, growing up in Soviet ruled Hungary, where Hollywood, sci fi, and fantasy were forbidden. She's the winner of several independent writing awards, including the 2022 Cygnus Grand Prize. She is the author of the Last Lumenian series. It's SG Blaise.
Hi,
Hey, SG.
Lawrence. Hey, Lawrence, how are you?
Oh, I am great. I'm gonna give you applause from the people. People are pumped. Now, normally we would have a co-host, Wells. I think Wells is in the comments today because, as you know, SG, unfortunately, we have a very horrible, Hurricane Helene coming through, and a million homes in South Carolina don't have electricity. The last time I checked, it was hundreds of thousands in North Carolina as well. Um, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. Something like this can still happen in
Mhm.
in this day and age.
Yeah, I hope they are doing well. I hope everyone is doing well, staying safe. I hope this situation will clear up as fast as possible, and my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we were just talking about it now in the green room where you you see these things like kind of on the news sometimes, and it feels so distant, and then it kind of happens to people and people you work with and your friends, and it becomes more real. But there's actually also nothing you can do. You were saying maybe I can order you Uber credits or DoorDash, but that's impossible in a scenario like this, right? Because uh yeah, roads are flooded and things like that. So anyway, not
Our
anyway.
usual, yeah, our usual method of comforting doesn't
Yeah.
quite apply, and there's only so much we can say, and it really physically hurts that there's not much we can do unless they come to us, but maybe they're not even able to come to us.
Yeah. 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 Um, so yes, that's why unfortunately Wells can't be here. And if anyone also was going to join Wells and Three Fries Short later for the Terrell Rothery podcast, that's had to be postponed as well. But we're here, and hopefully we'll have a great time. And I kind of wanted to, start, I guess, with you, SG, about not even like your early career, your early life, actually. I want to know and hear more about how you grew up and what it was like in Hungary, and obviously Eastern Europe and Hungary in general, or just Europe in general, has that kind of beautiful tapestry and history and castles and things like that. But then obviously you were under a Soviet rule or influence as well. Yeah. So anyway, please describe, what it was like.
Very interesting to grow up in Hungary. As you said, on one hand, we had amazing history everywhere, buildings that were hundreds of years old, palaces, castles, forts, Roman ruins everywhere you could look, right? So you have that beautiful background and you're living under repression, which is a lot worse than oppression. There is a definition, I forgot, please look it up. It is big difference. And I remember my normal was you can't say names on the phone because you can get them into trouble, meaning they might lose their freedom and or their life. You couldn't have a lot of um, possessions because you're not supposed to have the money for that. So the fact that my dad had two VHS cassette video recorder was a big no-no, because where did you get it? How did you get it? There were always questions. And we didn't own the apartment that we lived in. It was the part of the city. They had a special name. And if you wanted to move, you had to find someone who was ready to move. and then everyone had to line up, and then you had to logistically arrange that you get their apartment, they get someone else's apartment. It was a very complicated process where your freedom was severely limited more often than not, including culture and art.
Did you know about this, or could you feel this when you were a kid, or was that just life and you kind of only could feel it and see it afterwards? What was that like?
It's a very interesting juxtaposition because as a kid, you're very excuse me, you're very protected by your parents and your
Mm.
family. So while we were aware of certain restrictions, we still were happy. We had everything we needed, not everything we wanted, but everything we needed. And looking back as an adult, now I see how dangerous certain things were, including the fact that my dad smuggled in Hollywood movies because they were largely forbidden. And when they premiered in the theaters, if you missed it, that was your only chance. And I was a 1-year-old baby when Star Wars came to Hungary. And my dad really had enough of the oppression, and he took it. I said, that's the last thing that he's done. He needs to show this to his children. And he found a way to smuggle the movies in. He didn't sell them. He translated them to Hungarian, used his own voice to dub them, and we had very secret movie nights, Saturday and Sundays, with his voice, giving us what we needed to understand because we couldn't
Yeah.
learn. Isn't that funny?
Wow. So was he playing each of the parts, or was it more of a summary of the scene? What was that like?
I think he was sort of playing the parts, but he was very focused on timing. So it was more of him like he would re-record. Oh no, I was 2 seconds too late. No, re-record it. So it was a fun process to watch his work ethic and
Yeah.
how much passion he put into this hobby. And then he introduced me to sci-fi and fantasy at a very young age.
So when you watch or rewatch Star Wars, or happen to see a clip online or something these days, do you hear the version that it is now, or do you hear your dad in his commentary?
Here a little bit.
Yeah.
I have these flashes of memories. I remember him sitting by the TV. He had his big headphone on and a microphone, and he's very focused on what he's doing. I definitely remember those moments.
Oh, so, because I read that, in your bio, and we've obviously spoken and met before, and um, at what point or when did you realize you love sci-fi or fantasy? Was it in your childhood, or growing up? Can you explain that?
I realized that I love sci-fi and fantasy the second I watched the first Star Wars movie. My mind was blown wide open. I had never seen anything like that. There were planets, there were alien cultures, space travel, intergalactic war, empires. I couldn't get enough. I was so hooked on it that I remember I rewatched the first movie probably 20 times.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. Um, and at that point when you were young, did you ever think about you wanted to, write sci-fi and fantasy, or was it really just kind of experience as a fan, or what was that? What was that kind of like?
Uh, I I had a dream. I had a nightmare, to be precise. And I was probably 9 years old. And I took control of this nightmare. It was I'm sorry, my eyes are a little bit allergic. I'm not crying, I promise.
Okay, okay.
And I became the hero of this dream. And I had to save my brother from this spider crab creature. And it was such a powerful dream. I think that was the first time I experienced lucid dreaming, that I wrote it down immediately. And I had this urge that I wanted to share this with my family, and also with my class the following day. So I asked permission from my teacher. She made me wait the whole day. I was sitting on needles. I couldn't pay attention. This is like third grade or fourth grade. And then finally, right before, 10 minutes before the bell, she allowed me to read it to the class. And my voice was shaking. My belly was shaking. I was profoundly sweating. I don't know how I got a word out. And it was like this little 4x6 notepad, right? And I'm reading it, and everyone's quiet until I hear laughter. There was a joke, they laughed. And then I'm finished and they're clapping. And I remember looking around saying, wow, what an amazing experience. I want to keep doing this.
Oh, wow.
That's how I started.
Yeah. And so would you say like a lot of your writing or building worlds and characters, is that inspired by Star Wars or other sci-fi that your dad was able to smuggle in, or is it kind of like, yes, developed later when you could access more of the media?
It's very interesting how the mind works, and I was definitely inspired by everything and anything I saw. I watched Bruce Lee movies, so martial arts. I watched Indiana Jones, Terminator, Back to the Future, of course, Star Wars, comedies, Disney princess, movies, Snow White, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, anything and everything that my dad could get his hands on, he would bring it home because, we would not have access to it until the late 90s or mid 90s and 1990. And I remember I was soaking it up like a sponge. And I was inspired by that experience, that fantastic feeling that you're excited, that you feel like you can do anything and everything you want. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to infuse into my stories, to give the readers that same feeling of fantastical experience, adventure. They're getting transported out from the reality, the harsh reality of life, into a fun adventure.
Yeah. So that kind of from Star Wars and the other media and everything, and you reading, your story to your class.
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell me the story? What happened, like afterwards, and and we'll continue on with your life. What kind of
So
happened next? Yeah.
how much time do you have, Lawrence? Because boy, do I have a story to tell you. To keep it short,
Yeah.
I'm just going to highlight the main events. I
Sure.
remember around 12 years old, 11 or 12, I was struggling in elementary school. And I still had that idea that I want to keep writing, but, not sure what to do with it. I'm still young. But I knew that I can't keep going the way I was going, failing my classes and not doing well. So I created a short-term and long-term plan. It was very simple. The long-term goal was to get a great job. And then my short-term plan was, well, then I'm going to need to go to a great college. That means I need to get into a good, very good, strong high school. We had to do an entrance exam at the time. It wasn't just automatic that you get into any school. You actually had to apply and do the exam. And then I also knew that if I want to get into a good high school, that means today, right now, I have to do my homework and I have to do better in school. And that was my big plan. And it helped me to get into a very good high school, which I loved. And that allowed me to look around and say, okay, I want to be a writer. That's not a job that's going to get me, an income immediately that would allow me to keep writing, which means my first priority should be to actually get a day job. And that's why I applied to accounting and went to college for that. And I am terrible with numbers, Lawrence. I don't know how I survived. It was phenomenal and also very tough. 3 years. I did a English college, a British college, and it was surreal because by then I knew I'm gonna get married to my husband who lived in Boston at the time.
Mhm.
And I had this shocking realization that I am not able to speak a single word in English.
Yeah.
And all of those dreams of writing books came crushing down around me because how am I going to overcome such a big obstacle, a language barrier, because I can write in Hungarian. I'm learning English, so I'm losing out on becoming very proficient in Hungarian. And I'm also learning English, but I'm so far away from fluent that I may be never able to write a word. So it
Yeah.
was a very shocking moment in my life, 2001. And of course, other things were happening at that time. And first time I, experienced the grief, after 9/11. And, having all of that, we're newly married. It was a very interesting time of my life and a lot of anxiety. I didn't fit in. I had no friends. I couldn't even see my mom for 3 years because we couldn't afford to get her to visit me, and she couldn't afford a plane ticket to come and visit me. So we were trying to keep in touch with over the phone, but we had a maximum of half an hour because it was, long distance call. You don't want to go bankrupt just because I'm
Yeah.
calling. And so it was a very interesting time of my life with culture shock, language barrier. I couldn't get a job because even though I had a British Bachelor of Science, it was not an English accounting, not an American accounting degree. And
Yeah.
we had one car at the time, so my husband needed it to drive, and I just didn't know what to do with myself, So I just dived into reading and dived into learning English. And then I had my son,
Yeah.
2005. And then I became a mom, and that took priority, of course. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so twice I tried to write something. It was horrible. It was horrendous. Alex had to redline the whole thing. My husband had to redline
Yeah.
the whole thing. And I guess I didn't want to give up, but it didn't feel like that's a dream I can reach.
Yeah.
So, I went back to being, mom, and started to broaden my friend circle, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we moved to California just to make things harder. And just the time when I built, I had some friends. No, bye. We're gonna go to the other side of the country and see ya.
Yeah.
That was an
Well,
interesting.
so we can, because I think we're gonna start to get into like the writing story. But before we move on to that, there's just one more thing. Um, I think you mentioned you wanted to, potentially talk about um, grief and the grief from
Yeah,
losing your father at a young age. And we've talked about grief a lot on this channel, and it is a part of life. But grief has no time, I guess. There's no time limit to it. Um, yeah, and so yeah, you were just mentioning how you you were trying to call your mom as much as you can, but obviously, and I remember those times where you need like calling cards and you had prepay cards, and there's almost only so much time you have. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about, I guess, losing your father, especially somebody who was so inspirational and influential, to you in introducing you, and literally smuggling in this world, for you, these worlds for you.
it definitely came as a surprise that he passed away. He had brain cancer, which the doctors didn't tell us. So he got sick, 1992 August, and by 1993 July, end of July, he was gone.
Hmm.
And so, I saw him go to the hospital getting surgeries and not getting better, but we didn't know what was happening. And I remember this moment. I'm standing in my bedroom and I have homework to do, and mom is running to the hospital to get lunch for my dad because hospital food wasn't exactly top of the line. And I'm alone and I have to do this homework, and I had this huge realization, and it's like a lightning bolt, that it doesn't matter. My dad is not here, he's sick. What am I doing with this homework? And it was extremely difficult to do my schoolwork and not to fall behind while watching my dad slowly dying very painfully, in at home and in the hospital. And when he passed away, um, I'm 12, almost 13, and Of course you're shocked. Of course you're shaken. But I didn't understand that I'm not gonna see him. What does that mean, that I'm not gonna see him ever again? My mom struggled with her grief very, very much, and I turned to reading. I turned to reading because I didn't know what else to do. And that reading allowed me to calm that anxiety, to calm that grief just a little bit, so I can do that day and go another day, another week, another month. And then when I went to high school, you know, nobody understood why I was sad.
Mm.
And I was watching my classmates. They're all having fun. They're talking about nail polish. They were doing some weird stuff with their hair, and I couldn't relate. I couldn't relate because I was grieving inside. I was so sad, and I felt like an outsider. And it was hard to make friends. I ended up having some friends, but it was very hard to make friends, and no one could really relate. And I remember a couple of times the teachers would see me, being outside on the corridor, waiting to get into the classroom. And they're like, "Oh, why are you so sad?" And I'm like, "Well, I
Yeah.
have a short answer and I have a long answer." And it definitely shaped my early years, that I felt like I didn't have that, people didn't have that understanding. I couldn't show them that side of me that was aching and hurting. And there were times when I felt like I was in physical pain from grief. And that's when I just turned to reading, kept reading. I read every book I could. I read the first book my dad wanted me to read, and I read it standing by the bookcase. It was only a 200-page book, but I think that allowed me to connect to him, and watching the movies, hearing his voice allowed me to find that connection to him. But it was a very tough years. And even now, something big happens in my life, I immediately get sad because I wish my dad could have been here. And I know he sees from above, but I miss him very much every single day.
Mm. Yeah, because I wanted to also ask about that, because moving countries, and I've done it weirdly 3 times now. 3 times? Let me see. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Yeah, 3 times. I moved countries 3 times, and um, you the first time you kind of don't know, and then you leave so many things behind, and then the second time you realize what happens, and then the third time, and um, I guess you kind of went very quickly from the accounting job and finding your your husband and moving. And I guess I don't know if there's any perspective or anything, talking about, well, you obviously probably, hopefully love Hungary, but you have a complex relationship, obviously growing up there, your father's gone, your mother, is going to be left behind. I don't know. How did you think about moving to America? Um, yeah, just, I don't know, just if there's anything to explore there or talk about there, but it's,
Sure.
yeah,
When
it's a big move, a big change.
when I learned that I'm going to live in Boston, in America, I had this big excitement, but I couldn't picture my life beyond a couple of weeks because I
Mm.
couldn't see the future. I couldn't figure out what that would mean. And it definitely meant more than what I thought. It was amazing. It was shocking to see so many people. I come from a country of maybe 8, 9 million people, to go to Boston, where there is just a suburb, right? Like
Yeah.
Boston is, I don't know, 6, 7 million people. And, we went from a 1 lane road to six. And
Yeah, yeah.
everything was big and wide. And I started to understand why Americans have this amazing, experience, that everything's big and wide, and the opportunities are everywhere. And then you go to Europe and everything is small, compact, narrow streets, and it feels different. In fact, when I went back in 2012, I felt like a tourist in my own country. And it was so shocking, Lawrence. Someone shrank my country. I felt like this cannot be the street I grew up because it was so big. And I
Mhm.
remember there were dogs, there was always dogs that had no owners running around scaring you. And then I'm like, what is this? I felt like it was a teeny tiny country. And people started to talk to me in English. Before I
Mhm.
even opened my mouth, they thought
Right.
I was a tourist. And
Yeah.
they didn't catch on my Hungarian accent. I went to a Starbucks of all places in Hungary, and they immediately talked to me in English. Here's your coffee, ma'am. Oh, thank you. And I'm coming up like, wait, did we just have a conversation in English in Hungary? It happened. And I remember trying to look back all those movies I watched, and none of them prepared for the experience I had in Boston. And then we visited New York, Cape Cod, Connecticut, Niagara. I can't pronounce
Yeah,
it for the life
yeah,
of me.
yeah.
And it was just wonderful to explore America, and it gave me a better perspective and a better understanding of the world is a lot bigger than I
Yeah.
thought.
It's so interesting because you know, I've moved multiple times, and I was originally from Orange County, Southern California, so very close to you actually, only 45 minutes maybe north of you.
So,
Yeah, and really didn't appreciate it. But it's very much a bubble. A lot of my friends still live there. We all grew up, went to, one of our local universities, UC Irvine, or you decided to go an hour away to UC San Diego or something, and not even UC San Diego, San Diego State. There's just wonderful colleges and universities out there. And so, there's really no reason you need to leave too far. And then work wise, there's some amazing, awesome, huge companies out there, right? From Taco Bell to, all these headquarters, Hurley, like if you want to get into clothes. And so all it's kind of like all there.
mhm.
And it really, it really took me a long time. I had to move away, and then I lived in India for a while. And then um I remember going back to Irvine one day, and you know how in America no one drives, right?
Yeah,
Sorry, no one walks. You have to drive everywhere.
yeah.
And my parents and everyone wanted to go have breakfast. I said, "Oh, don't worry, I will walk to this location. I know it's far. It'll take me like an hour, 90 minutes, but I'll make it." And everyone was like so stunned. I was like, "No, no, no, don't worry. You guys drive. Just chill out in the morning. I'll meet you there in an hour and a half." And just the hedges that the bushes were like so perfectly cut, and the rows were really big, and the trees are really tall, and everything was really uniform. And it was the first time, which is weird because I grew up there, where I thought, wow, this is the American dream. Like, I can understand what people talk about as the American dream, or in Chinese, America is called Meiguo, which is literally beautiful country. Like those two words. Yeah. Directly translated. And it was like, wow, this is a really beautiful country. Um, so I kind of know what you mean, but like the reverse.
Yeah, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that I have this beautiful family. My mom lives with us now, and my
Oh,
son, he's a first generation American, although a second generation on my husband's side, who actually speaks perfect Hungarian, and he was a first generation. And my mom's super happy because everyone speaks Hungarian, so she didn't have to learn English. And it's a very interesting, as you said, there's a bubble around you,
yeah.
and how much I didn't appreciate the castle, the Buddha castle, or how many times I walked by a Roman ruin getting to my school. I'm like, yeah, it's just there. And now I'm looking back these pictures and I'm mind blown. What an amazing place I lived, and I took it for granted.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's move into your writing career. Um, but from what I know, it wasn't an easy journey. Um, there's a lot of anxiety and stepping
Mhm.
out of your comfort zone, and you want to be a writer, but you talked about how you were an accountant, and now you're in a foreign country, and now you have to do it in a foreign language. Um, and when there's like a really big, kind of concept of like, how do I write a book? And if you want to add to that, how do I write a book and get it published, like into an actual book, right? Oftentimes we put a lot of these kind of blockers and hurdles and things like that. So you're in San Diego now, I think, in the story that you were telling. Yeah, how did you start thinking about maybe I should write again? Now that you've moved, you're a mother, all those kind of things. Yeah.
Well, I started with a dream again, Lawrence. I had a dream in Austria while we were on a cross-country European road trip, and I woke up jet lagged. It's pitch dark, everyone's sleeping, but I'm wide awake, and I have this fragment of this dream, and I have to write it down immediately. This idea, I have to write it down, and I'm typing it on my phone. Thank God for smartphones, because I had nothing, no paper, nothing around me, and I'm typing it up. The only light coming from my phone, and it's book one, it's book two, it's book three, and it was this unbelievable excitement I felt that I have something, because before I didn't know where ideas came from. I had no real ideas for a book. I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't have an idea. So now I have this beautiful idea, and I hesitate a whole year, Lawrence. I complain. It's too hard to get a book published. It's hard to write a book. It's this, it's that. A whole year I complain, until my wonderful husband looked at me and said these wise words: stop complaining and start writing. And it was like floodgates opening. I don't remember 2013 April. I know somehow my son went to school. Everyone was fed. But I lost a whole month from 8 in the morning till 10 in the evening. I was typing, 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 and I had 150 pages. And I remember thinking, everyone's happy. This cannot be a story. This doesn't feel like the books I read. So I realized I need to learn how to tell a story. And we found this workshop in San Diego Writers Inc., a beautiful place to go, great support. They had workshops. They still have a lot of amazing workshops. And I took one. And I remember at the end, the lady said she has 2 spots opening for her read and critique. And it was a group. I had no idea what read and critique meant. But when she said, who wants to join? My hand was up. So I joined this read and critique group where we would submit about 25 pages, and they would put notes on it to critique your work. And it was always bi-weekly. So you had 2 weeks to get something, into their hands. And this was the biggest wind in my sail, the biggest counteract to my anxiety, Lawrence, because I didn't want to drive. I was struggling with driving. I was struggling with leaving the house. I was struggling with, talking to people, and also sharing that I'm writing. I couldn't even tell my mom that I wrote a book for almost 2 years. I was so embarrassed. It was like this secret I had to protect. So I started to drive to this read and critique, and it was so far. I immediately pushed that comfort zone so far out that I shocked myself that, look, you can do this. And I did those 25 pages, and I learned how to take critique and feedback really well, to the point that everyone was very amazed that I'm taking it well. That was another shock. I didn't know I'm going to do that. But I remember using this passion, the writing, to have an open mind, to embrace the challenges, the obstacles, to let it push me so that I would do more that I would say no before. And it was a phenomenal time. 6 years, 7 rewrites from blank page or something, 6 or 7. And I learned so much about who I am as a person,
Yeah.
not just as an author.
So if I can kind of deep dive into this part of the journey a little bit, because I know we have a lot of our members out there who they want to write. They ask a lot of questions around publishing. Just I think like with it just I think it really resonated with what you were saying about all of these things, and then you luckily had a husband who said, just start writing. You mentioned anxiety, I guess, there for kind of the first time. Was I guess the anxiety of even just starting to write, that was the reason why you didn't start for a year, or was it something else that was kind of in the way?
think if you allow me to go a little bit bigger picture, I
Sure.
think I always struggled with anxiety. I just
Yeah.
didn't have a name for it. I was about 7 years old when I had this recurring nightmare that my dad's going to die because he's going to go to the Third World War. And it
Mm,
completely made sense in my child brain that if that was World War One, World War Two, it's completely logical that there's going to be a third one and he's going to die. And this went on a whole year. I mean, severe. I would wake up sobbing, crying, and almost every night I had this dream. And then I managed to convince myself when I was 8 that wait, there is no reason to have a third world war. Little did I know. And so that was my first big conscious encounter. And then I always had, every time I had a new class, a new teacher, I thought that's part of worrying. Maybe I'm just a little bit more worrier, right? It's fine, it's normal. And I didn't really voice this to my parents or to anyone. I just dealt with it. There were good days, there were not so good days. But when I was doing, the read and critique group, it was almost a light bulb moment that I had a name for this. It's anxiety, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I definitely didn't want to tell people, although I did mention it to my read and critique teacher. Because I noticed that if I would go first, that would allow me to calm down.
mm.
Because if I have to wait for my turn and I'm the last one to go, I would be literally sitting on shaking, sweating, and all that fun, anxious moments. So she was kind enough to let me go first. But I noticed that they didn't really understand what does that mean. And it you don't have to understand, but you kind of get that little pushback of, oh, okay, she has to go first. So that was
Yeah.
one of my coping mechanism
And
is
what year was this approximately?
this was 2013, 14, 15.
Okay.
It's like
About 10
first,
years ago or so. Yeah.
yeah,
10
first
years
three
ago.
years of this writing career. And I noticed that if I push myself to go first, and then that helps me, to become stronger and less anxious. So I started to find things that I could push myself, and it was safe to do it, but it's definitely out of my comfort zone. And this cumulated into 2 years ago, I went to improv class.
Okay.
And because I was so worried about, speaking in public, doing an Instagram live, I kept canceling. I was having an anxiety attack. I can't do this. And I said, this is no way, after the COVID, everyone's going back to regular, normal life. I can't just say no to these things. And it's part of being an author. And so I wanted to embrace that part. I went to an improv class, and then I learned that I had to go on stage.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole, because they want to test your knowledge. And I remember going on that stage, the group that was supposed to go in front of us, so we would have 20 minutes to kind of warm up, they never showed up. So we just get into the back of the house, and they're like, go, 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 go. And I'm stumbling onto this stage, like, what's happening? What am I doing here? And flabbergasted and confused. I'm like, I don't remember anything I learned. And luckily we did it with the teachers. And I had a great time. I didn't even realize that we started doing the improv. I was like, what is happening? Because of course I go first, I immediately, who wants to go first? That's me. And so that allowed me to learn that I can handle and to let go. Because I wonder if my anxiety also tied to, having no control in a situation. And that might be tied to losing my dad, losing that safety. Or just growing up in an environment that no matter how much your parents protect you, the second you leave the house, you're not safe. You can't say things because you can get someone into trouble. You have to protect your family. I had to lie at a very young age to protect my family. Because if anyone asked me, do you have, possessions? Nope, we have nothing. We don't have a VH cassette player. We don't have anything. So it was a very interesting time because you're young, you're impressionable, and wanting to be honest and good and having this. Well, you can't really because you're gonna send your family into trouble, jail. They might even die. We knew that if the black car shows up at your house, you're dead. That's it. You're done. You're never gonna be seen. So it was a very interesting way of growing up, because I wonder if that contributed to the anxiety, or that just enhanced it.
Yeah.
I would
It,
never know.
how does that um I guess to like I don't know if you're able to know like how it's affected you today. I guess what I mean is like, you're in the US now, and you don't necessarily have to lie in those kind of ways or hide things. It almost felt like when you were a kid, it's like you had, ankle weights, right? Or you were running with
Yeah.
a parachute on all the time because you had to have your senses up all the time.
Oh yeah.
And now that you don't have to have your senses like so heightened, um but are they still on? And it's something that, you have to keep dealing with, or is it actually much more liberating and free?
It's actually both,
Mm,
Lawrence, because in a way, I experienced freedom of culture, freedom of speech. That was very unique, very, very refreshing. But at the same time, being a woman, you can never really let your guard down. And that's another way of one of the first self-defense technique. There are a couple. The first one they tell you is you going to lie to defend yourself. You go into a bar, you're alone, and you're gonna say, "This is where my boyfriend sits. You can't sit next to me." Or you're gonna pretend you have a ring on. That's lying. But you have to do it to create that protective shield around yourself. Or you're always aware who's around you. You don't smile when you're out and about because you don't want to look like a prey. You go around, you make eye contact with people to show I see you, especially in the elevator. So there is this juxtaposition of, yes, I feel better here, but as a woman, I'm more aware of certain self-defense techniques that we barely begin to scratch when I was a young girl.
mhm.
You know, it's interesting.
Yeah. Um, well, on the kind of flip side of, knowing these kind of defense techniques and things, when it comes to writing,
Mhm.
and creating new ideas, or even improv, I don't know if it's the same or different. Do you have any kind of processes or habits or rituals or anything, um, to help you kind of get into the mood or help spark your creativity as well?
Well, if you allow me to piggyback on the first part,
Yeah.
your question, or just add to that, when I was around 2015, I found a Jeet Kune Do teacher. And I don't know if you know what Jeet Kune Do is. It's Bruce Lee's mixed martial
Oh,
art that I was fascinated. I always watched the Bruce Lee movies as a young kid. I shouldn't have, but I did. And I was fascinated that he created a martial art form, and I wanted to study that. And I found a teacher who was the two person away from being Bruce Lee's student. So he was taught by one of the six original Bruce Lee students. And I remember that was a huge freedom, a huge confident boost to learn the self defense and to give me the confidence. I started it because I wanted to write fight scenes. And I didn't realize how much it's going to affect me as a woman, as a person, to give me that strength and confidence that now I'm walking with straight back and I'm not afraid because I know what to do. Please don't test me. But it's a very interesting feeling to have that. And back to the second part of the question, my routine evolved. Before the book was published, I took a lot of days off. I took a lot of time to process what I learned. I never pushed writing because I knew that's how you create that association of you're sitting in front of the blank page and it's not working. So if I couldn't write something within the first 5, 10 minutes, I would walk away. And sometimes I would take a month off or even 4 months off, right? And then as I published my book, I realized it's kind of important to have a book a year out so that the readers don't fall behind and they don't forget too much about the previous story. So I developed a more efficient way of getting ready to write. And I can thank writing prompts. They teach you to let go, to be creative in a certain amount of time. I usually would set 15 minutes, but I would take 40, 50 if I needed to finish that story. And it taught me that when I'm ready, I write and I just freely let go. I don't judge, I don't critique, I don't edit. You never edit the first draft. It's a free flow.
It's interesting because I just wanted to check or see. You know how you said when you finally decided I'm going to start writing, a year into it, your husband pushes you, and then you write this happy story. You said it was in a dream, right? That you had the story or these like, these pictures in your mind, and there was a book and a second book and a third book and, these stories. Is it the series that you're writing now, or is it actually a totally different story?
It's very much, that dream was very much the nugget, the golden nugget for this series. I did develop it and got deeper and more structured. That's the fun part about the ideas, is that you start with that golden nugget, but then you develop it into a story. And it's okay that it's not completely the same, but the character, the ending, the love story, the adventure stay the same. And it's a phenomenal feeling when that happens.
Yeah, no, I love that because the reason why I wanted to ask is actually Tommy, who used to work with us as a producer for a long time here at the Companion. He's actually watching today as well. He's in the comments, and he said to me, everyone's first book is terrible, so try to
Mhm.
write your first book as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And it just resonated with me and reminded me as you were saying, oh, so I just started writing and writing and writing, and it was, I don't want to say your work was terrible, but it didn't work because it was just a positive book, right? And not a lot of drama going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that is, as I hear more people who write and create, it's like get the first book, get the first movie, get the first poem or whatever it is that you're doing out of your system. And I think what I'm hearing with you right now is your first draft is going to be terrible. Don't edit as you write, just write. get get it all out. And then you can like edit it 50 times
Oh,
later.
and it's so true, Lawrence. And that's the funny part about any creative stuff we really do is that it takes time to find who you are. It takes time to find your voice, your artistic personality. And you don't have to create perfection. Not at the first draft, not at the last draft. You reach for the best story, and it's okay if it's not perfect. Because if we try to achieve perfect, we'll never publish. We'll never let that art see the light of the day. So, one of the things that's a very important lesson is that you do not go for perfection. You go for the best you can do at that time with the knowledge you possess. And then when you learn more, you become a different person. You're going to have a different art, a different quality of art. No need to go back and dismantle that because I didn't know. If that makes you happy, go for it. But it's okay to let go because you're evolving as an artist, you're evolving as a person. And it's beautiful to see that every book, every art is going to be better than the one before. It's part of the process.
Yeah. And one reason why I wanted to bring you on and I found it so interesting is I would describe it as when you were talking to me. So if I got it wrong, um apologies, but it's like you've had like roughly like in my mind at least, like let's call it a 10-year career in which the first like 6 or 7 years there was no book or it was working towards the first book, right? And it takes about 6.5 or 7 years, I think, from what I understand, for the first book to come out. And then this energy or this, I don't know, something has changed, and every single year, like you said, another book, right? So it was like, so for the benefit of everyone kind of watching and listening, it was like, yeah, the first 6, 7 years, it took 6, 7 years to get that first book out the door. And then the second book was a year and the third book's a year or even months. Yeah. Can you kind of describe how that happened and what was it, that kind of blocked you from, not
Mhm.
blocked, but why the first book took 6 or 7 years. And then afterwards, it was like 12 months and 12 months and 12 months. Yeah.
Well, the reason the first book took 6 or 7 years is because when you first start, and embark on your journey to become a writer, a painter, a sculptor, whatever it is you do, you don't necessarily know that art form. So it involves learning your art. What are your tools? When you write, it's usually some form of structure. You want to have a skeleton, a roadmap that you know to follow so you can put your art on it and then use the structure as a vehicle to deliver your art. So that takes time because there are so many tools are out there. You need to find what works best for you. So that takes experimentation, that takes effort, that takes consistency, that takes perseverance to go through. I don't want to use the word failed projects, but projects that don't quite, work. So it's a progress, it's a journey. Then you have to deal with, there is no feedback, there is no audience to boost your confidence who loves it, who tells you, keep going, keep doing it. I had my wonderful husband and my wonderful son who were the alpha readers, and they were very much encouraging. But when it's family, you go, I
Yeah,
know you,
yeah, yeah.
you basically have to, that's part of your marriage vow. You have to say it's awesome. So you have that little nagging voice in the back of your head that, yeah, he's obligated to say that. But what if he's wrong? What if I'm that poor singer on American Idol who thinks she has the most amazing voice and everyone goes, oh my God, just stop. So you have this weird imposter syndrome going on. At the same time, you're trying to be creative and you fight the challenges, because when you learn something, there is resistance, there is push and take and give and take, and some things work, some things you immediately understand, others doesn't quite click. So you have these struggles, challenges, obstacles, then you start to overcome them. It gives you that amazing push, and then suddenly you're ready to publish and you think, well, that's the end of my journey. Well, hold on. That is a new beginning. You were working for that goal, but it's only a pit stop. It's actually not the end of your journey, especially if you're writing a series. That's only another beginning. And that was that realization I had after I published the first book. And I did spend a good 3 months just doing nothing. I was on a high. I was super excited. I was refreshing the Amazon page. Is there a review coming in? Anything? Anything? Of course, it's going to take time. And then I realized, well, wait a second, I need to get the second book out. And one of the best advice I can give to writers is kind of start working on your next book if you're doing a series. Even if you just do a little bit here, a little bit there. By the time I started the second book, I already had a year of structure notes behind me that I could refresh, revise, and rely on. And so that's why the second book, even though it looked like it took a year, it actually took 2 years. And then the third book was truly 1 year. And I learned that my process is that I spend 4 months on notes. I write the book in about 30 days or less. And then I send it to the editor. At that time, I spend, because it takes 8 weeks for the editor usually to you get back, because it's a big, it's a line and developmental edit. So it's a big chunk that they have to do. And that's the 2 months or three I spend on developing the world building. That's the part that I sprinkle in, like, what does a daily life look like? What does the clothing look like? How do these characters look like? Because first I want to explore who they are,
And
what makes them great.
so while the editor is reading over your book, your world building of the same book, not like the next book, right?
It's the same book, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And then usually after the second line edit, I start the structure notes of the next book that will be the following December. So that year I can write the book in December again. It's I love December. I don't know why. And then I write that book for next year. And this worked great until we started to do 2023 and I had 7 events. And I realized that's a whole level of different anxiety, different feeling, because I couldn't do anything a week before and a week after. The first time I did an event, it was such a rush Such an amazing excitement, such an amazing experience. I didn't know I'm gonna love it so much to be there, to talk to the readers, and how much energy they gave me, and how much that was a feedback loop, that they got happier, I got happier. And then I go home and I crush, because all
Mm.
that positive energy, it just comes crushing down. And with each event, it got better, and I think it comes to my personality. I'm very much a 0 to 100. I either do something and it's you get 100% out of me, or I don't do anything and I'm useless. So that's what I experienced in 2023 with these events, and they got better. I got more of that, trained that muscle for the events to be able to handle it, the mental muscle. But yeah, it's constantly evolving, and just when you think you learned something, there's always a new challenge.
Yeah.
And when you overcome that, it's a phenomenal feeling.
So, a couple of things that you said there, I wanted to make sure we circle back to, which is, you were saying you were refreshing the Amazon page, and I asked you this one the first time we met, which was, did you ever think about going to traditional publishing or self-publishing, or let's call it independent publishing? And you were very energetic, and you're very positive, and you're very much for the independent publishing route. Was there any experience that you had also with the traditional side, or what was the reason and some of the decisions that ultimately had you go down the independent route?
Mhm. Well, one of the biggest decision I had to make was to choose independent or traditional, right? And what helped me to make that decision is the knowledge that often just querying takes 6 months, and it doesn't guarantee a yes, right?
Hmm.
And I had this urge that I don't have time to wait. I
Yeah.
I have this 13 book series, and I have big plans with this series. I knew from day one we're going to do a transmedia franchise. I knew it's not just going to be books, it's going to be comic books, TV show, movies, apps, games, video games, everything and anything. Sky's the limit. So I knew it was very beneficial to keep the rights in house. And the more I went to the writers' conferences, the more I learned about the pros and cons of what it means to traditionally publish and what it means to indie publish. And I weighed those advantages and disadvantages. And one of the biggest advantage for me outside of the rights and the timing is that I kept the creative control. I was the one who could, describe the cover to the cover designer, so it fits what I'm going for. And I was building my team of freelancers, an illustrator, cover designer, website designer, digital designer, so on and so forth. So that's what I call is that I'm building my empire.
Yeah.
I'm taking Star Wars level content with Disney level company, and that's my goal, that's my dream, that's my sky is the limit, or space is the limit, and we'll see where we land. But that was from day one. The goal is to have this multi-layered content and multi-layered franchise.
That's a really mature perspective, and I don't mean mature in age, I mean like a mature in experience, I guess. That's the kind of thing you hear oftentimes more like seasoned filmmakers and television writers, right? They've almost have gone through that traditional industry fire. They know the pros and cons, and sometimes they go kind of independent, I guess. What inspired you to almost like do that now, or what, versus um yeah, others who have kind of gone independent? And I guess one more thing I wanted to ask too is, how do you manage your ego? And what I mean by that is, I like the psychology ego. Because what I mean by that is, like, I also believe in independence and kind of forging your own path. But it
Mhm.
also means the traditional industry looks down upon you. They turn your back on you. You can't submit for certain awards. They don't respect you. Peers don't respect you. And you have to have like a really, and this is what I mean, almost like strong mental mindset or maturity to say, well, I'm thinking of something different and bigger. Um, but I do still want to win the traditional awards or have the respect of my peers. So anyway, I'm kind of asking this, how do you do that, or when did you discover this? Because it is a thing I think a lot of people do struggle with it. I struggle with it.
Well, first of all, I usually tend to open the door so that my ego can walk through first. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, how to answer this? I knew this in 2013, and my husband was fully on board because this was not our get rich quick scheme. This was a dream. This was my passion that became my husband's passion as well. And it was a very fun project for the two of us to start out and then grow it to the point that there is a team, an amazing team behind me who supports this, who believes in this, and they advocate for this unbelievable dream. And the reason I had a little bit easier time to come up with this, it's not an original idea. It's not just my idea. I think the way I came up with it is I learned about what Disney did. How did he start? How did he became from an artist to a whole empire? How did George Lucas start? So by learning and seeing what they did, they paved the road so I can start from the beginning with a better understanding and a more methodical approach that we could call groundbreaking, whatever we want to call it. And that inspiration was always in the back of my mind that I want to do this on purpose. I want to create something that's big, that creates safe place for everyone. It's diverse, both content wise and both as a company.
Yeah. So you kind of you've written the 4 books, and then the most recent project is a comic book. Um, how did that come about? Was the comic always the thing that you wanted to do, or did it naturally, as a story, you realize, no, this should be a comic book format. It shouldn't be a book or an animation or whatever. How was that kind of creative process?
The comic book was always in the plans.
Okay.
I didn't know how I'm going to do it. I didn't know what it's going to look like up until last December when I had the great fortune to collaborate with Mariano Niciza. And he was the editor and project manager on the Mythical Hunters comic book series, and also my amazing mentor who really condensed 30 years of knowledge into digestible bits so we can create a comic book in 7 months. And that comic book is part of the Seven Galaxies Chronicles. That's going to be this unbelievable content where we're going to have 176 comics. We're going to have 29 books. And that's just the beginning. And it all support each other. They all play out in the same galaxy, the same universe. You see Easter eggs, you see clues, mysteries that happens in this series, but then it plays out in another one. You get to see, surprise visits from your favorite characters in another series, right? So everything and anything tied together. I love layers. I love exploring how things tie together, and that's what I hope my readers and fans get to enjoy and immerse themselves in these books and other formats.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, this comic series is kind of like a prequel of some sort, or an origin story of one of the existing characters in your book, right? That's how
That's
that all ties together. Yeah.
That's correct, Lawrence. The Mythical Hunters is the origin story of a faction you meet in book 3 for a little bit, and then you get to see even more detail in book 6, which I'm currently developing for next year. Oh, I'm already having a blast.
Yeah, and SG also was very kind to autograph 3 copies of the comic book. I do have them. They're just in my drawers that we're going to also kind of raffle away and give as a competition. So we'll run that competition. We'll let everyone know how to do that. But no, thank you so much for doing that, and hopefully people will be introduced into this new world that you've built. Um,
Thank you,
yeah,
Lawrence.
and oh, of course, of course. So what about, like, what's kind of the next project? We're coming close to December, so you're on the clock. you're about 2 months away from needing to go towards the next sprint, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the best part is, Lawrence, with each book, I'm more confident of writing the books. I have more of my methods, the way I write the books. And I think the last one was 19 Days that I wrote, book 5, which is unbelievable.
Right.
And I'm so excited about the creation, the creative aspects of storytelling, and having this amazing team, Clio Consulting, who's helping to build the fandom. It allows me to really spend most of my time on creating the worlds. So the next in this is upcoming project is going to be book 6, a second installment in the Mythical Hunters comic book, and we are hoping to also start on a tabletop RPG game.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So, one thing kind of going a little bit back to, I guess, the process. In fact, actually, there's two things I wanted to ask, which is by going through this kind of independent path, I guess, right? I don't know what the best way of describing it is, but it's like, in television, when I was going through the process, you feel a lot of imposter syndrome and it's not real. And you actually need a commissioner, right? A broadcaster to like give you that first ever green light letter.
Yeah.
And then you feel like, I'm a television producer or writer or developer, right? You've got the deal. From your perspective, especially going independent, at what point did you and were you comfortable enough to say, oh, I'm a writer now?
Mm. I definitely had multiple points. The first one, when I told my mom, was almost 2 years after I started writing. She kind of saw me doing something on the computer, but I was like hiding it, like it's something she shouldn't know. It was very embarrassing to me. And the Read and Critique allowed me to talk about with other fellow aspiring writers. So that grew my confidence to tell, yes, I'm a writer. I may not be published yet, but I'm an aspiring writer. So that was the first step. But that didn't have a lot of confidence and validation. And I had to learn to validate myself, which took a long, long time. In fact, it's still a process. And the second step that allowed me to kind of really believe was the competition wins. I remember
Mhm.
submitting the first book in 2020, and within the first month, it came back with 6 wins.
Mhm.
And I was shocked. And my director of operation, Melissa, who joined our team at 2019, she kept telling me, see, I told you this is a great book. I told you it's gonna be awesome. And you're like, okay, I know I know you enjoy it, but what if you're the only person? And then I had the grand prize win in 2022, which actually I got it in 2023. And after that moment, it was like I got this calm that I am a published author. I am award winning. This series is getting industry level, validation, and also the reviews. At that point we had 300 or 400 reviews. It was suddenly I was able to take that deep breath and say, you know what? There is no more reason I say I'm not a good writer. I cannot have that imposter syndrome anymore. And I started to believe more and more and more in myself.
Yeah. It still is sometimes a little bit of that outside validation, isn't it, for you to get over that? Okay, and so, um, one thing we don't talk about a lot or enough, I guess, is like, creative people love not love, but like people always ask about the struggles and, getting to the point. I kinda wanna hear the other side of mental health, which is the celebration. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the point is, so you can kind of describe what you felt like was like the big victory or the big win or the moment you made it. How did you celebrate? Like, what was that moment? How did you celebrate?
It's very interesting to have that struggle, and I immediately tied it with a reward. And that was from the Read and Critique group when I said, I'm going to take any feedback, no matter how negative they are, no matter how personal they are, I'm going to take it, because if there is tiny thing in it that could help me become a better writer, I'm going to be grateful for that. And so that was the beginning of my beginning of this journey of turning my pessimistic approach, which may be anxiety, maybe pessimism, into an open-minded, positive approach that doesn't look at struggle. I look at it as a challenge that I can overcome. And that's how, I lasted on this 6 or 7 rewrites, when I actually had a writing coach who said at the second draft that it's ready to be published. And that was my dream to hear. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And I said no. I told her no. I can feel it in my gut. It's not ready. I need to learn more. I need to do better. I know it's not ready. And so I started to embrace the milestones, first, before it was published, every finished draft. That is very important, that when you finish it, it gives you accomplishments. So I started to look at this as mini accomplishments.
Yeah.
So that was my celebration of a little bit of shoulder pat,
But like, what do you do? Do you go out to dinner? Do you celebrate with your son and your
We definitely
husband?
had
Or you
dinners.
buy something? Yeah, what's the kind of thing that you
Did
do?
everything. I did
You do
everything. We
everything?
had
Okay.
celebratory dinners. I spent money in a game that I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
I bought a new outfit for a writers conference, right?
Right.
So I did everything that would cheer me up, but I also made sure that I enjoyed the process. So it wasn't. I wasn't calling it a struggle. I never complained about writing, and that was on purpose. Because if I don't enjoy the writing part, how can my readers enjoy reading that book? So I made sure that I gave myself a lot of mental health breaks. That's why I never force it. I don't believe in the you have to write every day, as long as it's not forced, or writing could look like you're reading a how-to book. That's still part of writing your book, or going to a writers conference, or talking to other authors, joining author groups. I'm part of an author mom group that we support each other no matter where we are in our process of publishing or getting, starting writing a book. So it was very important to me to keep an open mind and stay positive, and to allow mental health breaks.
That's what I was actually, my next question I was going to ask. We've created this enamel pin called Goblin Mode, where it's like no matter how hard you work and how successful you are, and you know, everyone needs a break from time to time, and you can turn into a little goblin and have a goblin day. It's the kind of day where you don't worry about anything, or you don't, and you can indulge, you can eat whatever you want, do whatever you want. Do you have like a perfect goblin mode or duvet day
Oh,
that you do to relax?
oh
What does that
boy,
look
you
like?
and I have a lot of goblin modes, Lawrence. I'm actually a troll at this point, but not the online troll. Please, please. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's I completely turn off my brain when it comes to, I either sit and play all day, on my iPad, or watch TV, go on a walk, meet friends, go out, have lunch or dinner with friends. And every single time I do that, by the end of the day, I have an idea. I have something that allows me to keep going, or I have a dream, or I just get, I say something, and immediately the light bulb goes off, like, oh my God, that's what's gonna happen, or this is what my character's gonna say. And it's so much fun to have these breaks, because the brain can recharge, and you refuel it watching my favorite TV show, binge watching Expanse, or anything, something fun allows me to get back into writing in a newly recharged energy. And in fact, thinking about next year's campaigns with Jenny from Clio Consulting is also unbelievably recharging, or going to events like LACC, LA Comic Con, that's coming up in the first weekend of October, is also extremely recharging.
Yeah, and you're gonna be there. So if anyone else is in the LA area, right? Southern California, you can visit SG at LA Comic Con. Yeah.
I would love I love spoiling my readers and fans, and it's so much fun to connect and geek out on stories, and I have returning readers and fans who stay and hang out around the booth, and then we're just joking. We're just joking around. We're making our day better, and to tell me that they love coming back to my booth because they leave happier. And then
Yeah.
I'm happier because it is a feedback loop. It's absolutely keeps building on itself. It's what an amazing human experience to have, is to
Yeah.
connect with another human being.
Yeah, and so for anyone, watching or listening, at least in London when SG was over here, she had this beautiful bar or pub kind of looking, set up with different kinds of magical, mythical alcohol, wine, bodily kind of things, and chains, and look like a old tavern basically. So I don't know if it'll be as grand as that in LA, but it's a great photo. It's a great Instagram photo to take as well.
Thank
So
you. It was such a
yeah,
blast to be at London, Lawrence. Of course, meeting you in person was awesome. And to have the scene, reenacted from the comic book, The Mythical Hunters, the bar, which is B.A.R.F, because it's bandits, assassins, robbers, folly. So it
mhm,
has a reason why it's that
yeah,
name. And it was such a blast to be there. Everyone kept asking if we're selling drinks. We didn't.
yeah,
So it was very convincing. But it was so much fun to be in London for the first time, be at the for the Love of Fantasy conference at the first time or convention. I had a blast.
yeah, yeah. It was great. Well, we're gonna move into our kind of last, short segment, if you will. It's a fun segment, and so fun. I even spent time making a little graphic for it. So we're gonna call it the lightning round. Um, yeah, that took me a little bit this afternoon to put together. All right, so we're gonna ask you a couple, like about 10 questions or so, really 11 questions. We're gonna go really fast, so just whatever's at the top of your head, you can answer. All right. Um, First question: five dinner guests, dead or alive.
Einstein, Oprah, my dad. Um, oh my God, Zena and Starbucks.
Okay.
I don't know if that was
Okay.
five.
That was five. Yeah, yeah, great, great. Okay. Well, if we do end up doing a powerful women fantasy draft, I think I'm starting to know who you're gonna pick. So, okay, next question: does pineapple belong on a pizza?
Absolutely not. You no. Mm-mm.
Wow, no pineapple fans. Huh? I'm
Nope.
into
Nope.
it.
Nope. Pepperoni
Okay.
through and through.
Okay, favorite villain.
Thanos.
Ooh, I like it. Lightsaber or a phaser?
Lightsaber. Oh my God, yes.
Best book you've ever read.
P.H. Howard, the 16 karat gold card.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Telepathy.
AI, friend or foe?
It depends. It's actually both. Depends on how you use it.
Okay. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Coffee with almond milk, hot, and sometimes on ice.
Oh, wonderful. Cats, dogs, or something else?
Dogs, unicorns, dragons, and sometimes cats.
Okay. Are there aliens out there?
Absolutely.
And if you could time travel, would you go into the past or into the future?
I would go and see how they built Stonehenge. I have a
Okay.
feeling it was time travel. There's no other explanation. I'm sorry.
Okay. So we have a tradition on the companion before we leave, which is the last guest will ask the next guest a question, but they don't know who that
Mm.
guest is. Um, and then, so I'm going to play you a question from Tom Hunter. He's the director of the Arthur C. Clarke Award,
Ooh.
um, which, by the way, takes independent, submissions as long as it's published in the UK. Just to let you know. Um, and then afterwards, if you can ask our next guest a question, if you can think of one, in the meantime. So first, I will be playing your question.
So, hello, future questioner E. My name is Tom Hunter. I'm the director of the Arthur C. Clarke Award for Best Science Fiction Novel of the Year. And Sir Arthur himself is famous for many things, but one of them is his 3 laws. And one of those laws is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. My question to you is, what technology do you consider indistinguishable from magic in either your personal or professional life, or anything really, and why?
That's a great question. Wow. You know, there are so many of technological advancement that I don't know a lot about. So to me, it feels magic. And right now it's AI. And one of the most interesting part is when AI hallucinates. It almost feels like there is some kind of magic is going on there, some kind of extra thing is happening. So that's to me technology that almost feels like magic, almost.
Oh, yeah. AI is pretty incredible, isn't it? When you need to ask a quick question, sometimes at least I, wonder, do I Google it or do I actually ask AI? No.
Problem to have. I had to go to the library and see if there was even a book for that. And then the librarian and we're like, we have no idea. I'm writing my thesis or whatever, the diploma stuff. And we're like, well, let's try this section. Nope, nothing. So yeah, it's
Great.
a good problem to have.
Yeah. Okay, well, can you ask the next guest a question as well?
Mine not gonna be as deeply, sophisticated. So first of all, I'm S.G. Blaise, a sci-fi fantasy author of the multi-award-winning Last Lumenian series. And my question is, how do you take care of yourself?
What a lovely question. What a lovely question. Actually, thank you so much for your time. It was so great to catch up. I hope we can actually reconnect again and do the draft. It could be a 15-minute offline podcast. But other than that, is there anything you want to share with the audience as a kind of the last word or last thing to say to them?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you and I'm grateful for this opportunity. And what I would like to share with the audience is don't be so hard on yourself. You don't have to be perfect to be the hero of your life. And if we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes, we cannot learn from it and we cannot be a better person the next day.
Oh, that's so lovely. Well, thank you everyone for showing up and tuning in, or if you're not here live, thank you for listening. We are going to do a social gathering. I think the link is also in the description. I need to do a couple of things with SG, after the stream. So you might just have to wait 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so before that kind of starts as usual. Otherwise, thank you everyone. Have a great weekend. Be safe. And yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.